a couple of minutes past 6. I think we'll start this Zoom Open Day virtual event. Thank you everyone for coming. Normally we would host this in person and you would get to walk around the room and meet all of us and see our posters with all of our projects on them. Unfortunately, we can't do that in this time, but this is the best that we can offer today, unfortunately. But we are here to tell you about doing a research project at the Center for Innate Immunity and Infectious Diseases, and we're here to answer your questions. So we have, so I'll tell you how the Zoom is going to work. You've already come in, you're muted and your cameras are off, so you can't control that. This is how a webinar works, but you are most welcome at any point in time to move your mouse to the bottom of the screen and click through to the Q&A and ask us questions. We've got a panel of people here to answer your questions. So at any point in time, so today we will have Paul tell us about our center, the CIIID, and the sort of research we do here. We've got Ash here, who's a research group head, and so he's going to tell you about supervisors at the research center and the type of projects which are available. I'm here to answer a few quick questions, or to give you a few ideas about administrative details, where to find out about projects. And Maddie is here to tell you about her experience of being a PhD student at Hudson. But we also have here in attendance, they're not going to talk, but they're going to be interacting with you in the Q&A. They're going to, a great range of PhD students. So they've been at Hudson, they know what it's like at Hudson, they've chosen their own supervisors. So they're here to answer your questions, and there's no question too big or small that you can ask us today. So ask us about how do you find projects? What sort of projects should you look for? Do we do this type of project? If you want to work on viruses, who should you talk to? Any of this sort of stuff. What's it like? Do you really get to do your own research? Anything, jump in the Q&A and they are here to answer your questions. And so this is us, the Center for Innate Immunity and Infectious Diseases, and I'm going to hand over to Paul now, who will.
Thanks, Steph. My name is Paul Hertzog, so I'm head of this centre of happy and hardworking people. I'm also Deputy Director of the Institute and run my own lab group within the centre as well. In this centre, we number about 100 people, broken up into small groups that I think, can you leave, sorry, go back,
sorry.
Steph, leave it on that. I was just going to say the lab heads are lined up along the front there. I think Ash will talk a little bit later about what they do. We're all, as is obvious from the title, interested in innate immune system, which is that first response to any insult that the body incurs, whether that be an abnormal form of self in cancer or autoimmune type antigens, whether it's infections. You know, and probably these days, you know, the importance of the innate immune system is no more evident than what we see in COVID-19 and the both the ability or inability to mount a good antiviral response, or some of the inflammatory diseases you see later. So this group of lab heads are all internationally, you know, very well known and hardworking people. They've been recruited carefully to have complementary skills and overlapping areas, so that as a centre, you know, we have a repertoire of different activities going where we can collaborate and lean on each other to make sure we do good science. I mean, their job is they essentially all run their own groups. They'd be your primary supervisors, often with more junior people in their groups on a day-to-day basis. In addition to sort of close supervision you'd get by these people, we also have some general meetings in seminars as a whole group. And that ensures that you learn not only from the small group you're in, but from the broader group of people there as well. We span many different disciplines, from biochemistry to microbiology and immunology, and everything from basic through to all forms of translational research. So I think there are opportunities to really do anything in terms of both the theory behind the project or the practical aspects of this. And, you know, we really aim, and I think achieve successfully, to do internationally best practice type of work. Next slide, Steph, thanks.
Yep.
Yeah, so I think I was asking one of my students yesterday actually what message I should give across, and in the third year of her PhD, she actually went to a lab over in England, and I think to address the first point there, she was surprised that actually that we were doing world-class research, and what we do on a day-to-day and what we tell them was on a par, if not better than what she saw in labs around Cambridge in the UK. So I think that's important that you get the opportunity to really work with world-class people. Our research is not only aimed at understanding the basics behind different diseases, but also approaches to preventing, developing diagnostics and also infections. We do not only government-funded type of work, but also we interact with industry and also have a couple of spin-out companies from the Institute. So those with entrepreneurial bents will have an opportunity to exercise that as well. And I think the success of this group of people is evidenced by the funding that you can see there, which is a good annual budget for about 12 groups, and attests to the success, and also means that the research is well resourced, and you don't have to sort of scavenge for reagents or equipment or any other resources. Next slide, Steph. Not sure it's on all these. Yeah, so the students get opportunities to publish, particularly sometimes even in honours, although that's a bit hard given the shortness of it, but certainly expected and is the norm during your PhD. And some students get to publish in very high impact journals. There's also the opportunity to present at scientific meetings, both locally and if you're lucky overseas. The centre is composed of, it says there in the middle, 100 or so scientists, where roughly a third or more of us are students, both PhD honours, some master's students, but that's probably a less popular course, but there are opportunities, and also undergraduate students who might be doing placements, Europe and so forth. And the rest are broken up into postdoctoral researchers, lab heads, like myself and Steph and Ash, and also research assistants. Next slide. Yeah, so what do you get from our centre? And Ash will give you some of the specifics, and some of the students will tell you about their experiences. And I think the handbooks will give you the specifics of some of the particular projects, but you'll come out with a good qualification that demonstrates that you're highly skilled in this field. You learn very broad skills like critical thinking and writing and speaking skills. We sort of nurture you along in all of these with not many expectations at the start, but you'll find you learn a lot throughout your year or many years, depending on the course you're doing. You get training in state-of-the-art research platforms, which will suit some people more than others. Those who are technically bent, and this can lead to more specific jobs if that's what you're interested in. And you get to work with really dedicated group of people who are really committed to improving human health and making good scientific discoveries. So hopefully at the end of this you come out satisfied that you've had a good year, well qualified, and hopefully inspired about the importance of innate immunity in the world as we know it. So Ash, on that note, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Paul. So yeah, welcome along tonight. I'll just reiterate what Paul said there before. My name's Ashley Mansell, so I'm one of the lab heads, one of the 12, as you can see there on those slides. I'll start by saying I would encourage you to read the book closely with the projects and really try to engage with the project. The most important aspect when you're looking for a supervisor and for a project is a project that you can be engaged with, and with a supervisor that you can work with closely, because you are going to work very closely with that person, particularly if it's a PhD, for a long period of time. And therefore you have to build up a rapport and an understanding with that supervisor. However, our centre is very well placed to offer a broad range of projects across a whole spectrum. As Paul mentioned there, we do from basic research to clinical research and everything in between. And one of the great advantages of our centre is these 12 lab heads, myself probably written out of that, of course, but the beauty of this is we do research all the way from microbiology through basic molecular biology, cell biology, but also then in vivo models, and then going all the way to developing therapies, and then also in the clinic. Therefore, you get a very broad range of projects through there that cover all these spectrums, going from infectious diseases, cancer, gastrointestinal disease, women's health, and respiratory disease. The underlying aspect of all these projects is really driven by inflammation. So to give you a bit of a quick flavour of the types of groups that are working here, our first and our major focus, I suppose you might say, across the spectrum is that host pathogen interaction in infections. And again, I'd encourage you to use the colour codes here in the book, because I'll only be able to briefly brush over some of the projects here. But Steph, if I could have the next slide, please. As you can see there, nearly everyone except for obviously Tony Sadler there, work on infections. And the beauty of our centre here is that we have projects ranging from looking at COVID-19, of course, as well as HIV, Zika virus, influenza, as well as bacteria like Helicobacter pylori and EPEC, and looking at those host pathogen interactions. And all these groups here work in that. The beauty of our centre is that a lot of these groups interact and collaborate quite closely. So you may actually have 1, 2, or even 3 supervisors. So you've got a very strong supervisory basis there for doing a project, as well as learning methodologies and protocols across a broad range of techniques. And that's an important aspect, again, when you're looking for projects, is what will you learn from these particular projects? What are the skills that you'll be able to take out and get a job with? And that's one of the great aspects of our centre, is that there's a broad range of techniques and methodologies and models and animal models and all these sort of things that you can learn and take forward. So again, we have a broad range of infectious groups there that are looking at all these different pathogens and their interactions with the host immune system, and obviously along the lines of the innate immune system. Steph, thanks. Of course, as I said there before, inflammation is an underlying principle of nearly all these diseases that we know of, and this impacts significantly upon multiple groups here, particularly the likes of Brendan Jenkins, who's also looking at the inflammatory process in cancer, Phil Barden, who's a clinician who looks at actually the role of inflammation in asthma and other respiratory inflammatory diseases. I myself look at influenza in conjunction with Associate Professor Michelle Tate there, as well as also how the immune system recognises and responds to these pathogenic infections. Michael Galtier is investigating the role of nucleic acids and their role in the innate immune system in driving inflammation and then developing therapies to actually block that inflammation. Jack LaPearson, she studies the role of salmonella and how that actually infects cells as a microbiologist, but then also what is the host cell response to that infection. She works closely as well with Kate Law, looking at cell death and how that can lead to inflammation and their role in a lot of inflammatory diseases. Dan Forster is looking actually at the role of microbiota, a very hot topic in immunology and the microbiology world at this point in stage. And of course, Tony is looking at actually the role of inflammation in autoimmune diseases. And so there's an underlying principle there of if we can understand how inflammation is being driven by these processes, then we can start to develop therapies to block them. And a lot of projects are centered around that interaction between the host, the pathogen, and the inflammatory aspects that come from it. Next slide, thanks, Steph. Of course, other aspects that come from chronic inflammation can actually lead to cancer. And this is where Paul, as you've already met, is looking at the role of inflammation, particularly the interferons, and their role in female reproductive cancers, such as ovarian cancer. Professor Richard Ferrero is looking at the role of Helicobacter, quite a famous, obviously, bacteria in Australian scientific laureate discoveries. And he's looking at the role of how chronic infection with Helicobacter can drive that inflammation and, of course, leading to cancer. Michael, again, is looking at using anti-inflammatory therapies to target tumours using interferons. And Brendan Jenkins is studying the role of GP130 and other inflammatory processes like STAT3 in the development and obviously the targeting of cancer. And of course, Tony Sadler as well is also looking at cancer. Again, understanding those inflammatory processes that can lead to chronic diseases like cancer. Next, thanks, Steph. And of course, infections can lead to gastrointestinal diseases. And obviously, you can see a lot of the groups who I've already mentioned there, looking at the microbiota, looking at the inflammatory process of the pancreas like Brendan is doing, or in the gut, or as Richard is looking at Helicobacter, and Tony, and of course, Professor Liz Hartland, who you haven't heard about yet, she's looking at the role of obviously gastrointestinal diseases with E. coli and the like, driving inflammatory diseases, and why some people can succumb to inflammation driven by bacteria and others don't. Next, thanks, Steph. Which brings us, of course, to women's health, where, as I mentioned earlier on, Paul was looking at the role of interferons, and Paul's group discovered a novel interferon called interferon epsilon, now spinning out a company to look at the role of maybe being able to use interferon epsilon to treat and target ovarian cancer and the like. And of course, the next one, thanks, Steph. And one that, of course, is close to my heart is respiratory diseases, because we look at, as I said earlier on, myself and Michelle, and also Phil, look at things like influenza virus, and of course, that's now segueing into COVID studies, where we're trying to understand why these inflammatory processes, as Professor Hartland is doing, is why are these infections driving this hyperinflammatory response in the pulmonary setting, and why is it then that this is not being able to be controlled? Importantly, all our groups here are actually trying to develop therapies to be able to be delivered to the lung to reduce that inflammatory load and therefore provide better health outcomes in pulmonary diseases. So I think that wraps up the different range of projects available within the centre. There's a wide range of experiences you will have, research expertise, and as Paul said, we're very lucky that we are a highly regarded, internationally recognised group for our studies across this broad range of areas that you can look into. And we believe we have a very training basis, probably best exemplified by the fact that our alumni students are now in positions all around the world doing postdocs and staying on and developing their own studies in labs across the whole world. So again, I'd reiterate, your best bet is read the book, find projects that interest you, that engage you, and contact the supervisor. And normally I'd say go and meet them, but now of course it's a Zoom meeting, and begin that conversation as to where you can go next, what studies you can do, and what you will learn during your stay at the Centre for Innate Immunity and Infectious Disease. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Ash. And this is the student book. We have answered a few questions to say, have a look at our research projects. So this is where you would go if you go to hudson.org.au, and at the top there's a drop-down menu for students, and you can find projects for 2021, or you can type this directly in and you can go to our project books. So now Maddie.
Muted. Hi everyone. Muted for a second there. That's a bit of a rookie mistake, but anyway. Yes, so hi, I'm Maddie. I'm a second year PhD student as part of the CIID. I'm with the Host Pathogen Interactions Group, which is supervised by Dr. Jacqueline Pearson. So I actually became an honours student at the Hudson after I was lucky enough to meet Jacqueline at one of these very student open days. So that was, of course, over on main campus in one of the big halls there. So a bit different to be doing it on Zoom, but hopefully certainly going to be just as valuable for you. I did a double degree of science and biomedicine for my undergrad, and I basically got to mid third year and I knew that I was really interested in doing research, and I liked the idea of doing something related to immunology, but I didn't really know what specifically I wanted to study. So one of the things I found really valuable about attending these open days was finding out more about the projects and learning more what the possibilities were, rather than just saying immunology or microbiology as my kind of areas of interest. I could definitely narrow it down a lot, even just by reading the projects and getting a vibe of what sort of thing I wanted to get out of it. And the other thing that was really important for me was finding a supervisor who understood what my goals were for my honours year, and who was able to work with me to help me achieve those goals. So like I said, I didn't really have a project that was, you know, near and dear to my heart. I didn't have any particular subject matter that I was passionate about, but one of the things I knew I really wanted to do was learn a wide variety of practical techniques and basically upskill myself as much as possible within that laboratory context. So that was something that I was really happy to do throughout my honours year. I tried out a variety of different techniques and skills. And so that was really important for me, and I was really happy that I found a supervisor who could help me do that and who understood what I wanted out of the year. But I certainly didn't just go straight for Jacqueline. I didn't know straight away that she was the one that I wanted to go with. I did shop around a little bit. I read through the project booklets here and at other centres, and definitely talked to several different people in person. I sent emails to more people than I actually met in person, and basically just went through and worked out what was going to be the best fit for me. One of the things I would normally recommend for this is going and meeting your labs in person, not just the supervisor, but also the other people who you might be working with. So the postdoctoral scientists or the other students. That might be a little bit hard, but definitely something that you can try and do if you are narrowing it down and you think you have a project you really want to do with a supervisor that you really want to work with. Definitely see if you can set up just like an informal kind of coffee, afternoon tea sort of Zoom or something like that, because it's really important to recognize the fact that you're going to be spending a lot of time with these people. You don't have to be best friends with all of them. That's not actually the relationship you're going to have with everyone, but it's important to find a group and a place that's a comfortable fit for you. And happily, CFIIID has been that for me. So I've made lots of friends here. I've had the opportunity to work with several different groups within the centre. My co-supervisor is also one of the CFIIID lab heads, so I've been able to work with her and her group more closely, as well as with my own group. As Paul said, we have various meetings and seminars that the centre runs, and that's been really valuable for me as well in terms of hearing about the work that the other groups do, hearing about the variety of different techniques that our centre already knows how to do and has experience with, and learning kind of what's possible with my own project through hearing about their work. The other thing I found really valuable was the actual presentation practice at these seminars. It sounds really scary as an honours student, but you get the chance multiple times throughout the year to practice your presentations that you might have to do for your coursework in front of the centre. And we're actually a very friendly audience for that. There's a lot of people who are familiar with your project in your field, and it's a really helpful way to practice answering questions and just get more familiar with introducing your project and explaining in a way that makes sense to other people. And, you know, communicating your passion for the project to other people as well. Like I said, I've met lots of friends here, had a lot of fun throughout all of my projects, and it's really great to be in an environment that is supportive and gives you these opportunities throughout. I've actually had presentation opportunities outside of the centre as well, so I've been able to present at the student retreat. I've competed in the 3-minute thesis competition, and I was actually able to present my honours work even straight after honours at one of the immunity conferences that's run in Victoria. So that was really exciting for me. And that's definitely just a great outcome to have at the end of your honours year, because even if I didn't continue into a PhD, which I obviously did, it's great to end the year with those kind of outcomes and, you know, tangible proof that you have upskilled yourself and gotten that presentation practice and that writing practice that you get from doing your thesis. Yeah, next slide, Steph, please. Of course, it can't all be just about your academic and, you know, professional outcomes. Like I said, there's plenty of students that you can make friends with throughout your time. And one of the ways in which I've been able to do that is through the Student Society. So I've been the creative officer for HIS this year and last year. I've made a lot of the posters that are kind of stuck in on the slide there. So we run events throughout the year which are for students and run by students, and these are partly social events, lots of food, lots of games, lots of coffee catch-ups, that sort of thing, but also again those academic opportunities, so things like running the 3-minute thesis competition, the student retreat, and the MHTP symposium. So again, giving opportunities for students to connect with each other, learn from people outside of their own group or their own centre, and just get friendly and, you know, have those kind of presentation opportunities throughout their whole time. That was about all I wanted to say. Thanks, Steph.
Okay, Maddie, and just so you know, there's someone in the chat who says, thanks, Maddie, for the reassurance and the heads up. So they've appreciated your talk.
That's good.
So you can get back in the chat and answer some of them.
Excellent.
So we do not want to go over time here. The next Zoom session will start in 4 minutes, but this is your chance to get some questions answered. Ash has highlighted one of the questions that he will answer live, and that question was, Ash, do you still have it there? It's just jumped away from me. Oh, are the honours projects available for Bachelor of Science students? If you've got a background in immunology. Ash, do you want to expand on your answer there live?
Yeah, look, there's quite a few projects there that would suit BMed Sci students. We've obviously had many BMed Sci students over the years. Again, it really is a case of contact a supervisor or supervisors and have that discussion with them. But I think you'd be very well placed to be able to, you know, find a project that will appeal to you and engage with and have those conversations moving forward.
I wanted to answer a sort of generic few questions that have been coming through, which is, do we take on master's students? Do we take students halfway through the year? If you come from one department or a different department, do we take you on? And the answer is overall, yes. We take on students partway through the year. We take on master's students. We take on students from different departments within Monash. But it will depend on the supervisor that you want to work with and if they're available to do that. Ash, do you have any more insight into that? Or should we just recommend that they find a supervisor?
One of the great advantages we have is we're not a uni-based faculty, which means that we actually have a lot of flexibility. What we can do is actually, you can come to us from outside the department you've already been in, and we can actually potentially put you into another department as well, or faculty that may actually suit the project better, or you know, what may be in the future as well. So we actually, one of our advantages is the flexibility we have in being able to sort of adapt and plan our projects accordingly to the project or the student as is. But again, that's a conversation to have with the supervisor.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Ash. Sorry if I can just add to that, Steph. But you know, often it is a two-way discussion, and you can tailor. There's often flexibility in the project so that you can tailor to individual likes or dislikes.
Yeah. So I'm going to summarize by saying, if you are interested or if you're thinking about it and you're not entirely sure, step number one is to look at our projects which are available, look at the supervisors who are available, look at the types of things we offer in that project book, which is online. Here, again, the information. Don't worry about how to apply and deadlines and scholarships and everything. The most important thing is, if you're interested, have a look at our projects. They're up there because we're recruiting students. The supervisors want to talk to you. The best thing you can do is write an email to them and say, I'm interested. Can I talk to you further about research projects? And now, just while we wrap up and before you move on to the next session, one final question, Paul can answer it. Student in the Q&A says, I'm interested to join CIIID, but they don't have a microimmunology background. Can they still join us?
Yeah, I think we take students from all sorts of backgrounds, whether it's computational. We've had people from biophysics background come and do projects. So I think we're open to anyone.
I think your best example is Sam Forster, came with no biological background at all. Is now a lab head.
Right.
So thanks everyone for coming. I actually can't put the link in the chat because the chat is disabled, but thank you for coming, and hopefully you've got the link for the next session. You should have had an email about that. So if you want to jump over to the next session and hear about CRH, and thank you for coming. Thanks for your questions.
Thanks, Steph, for emceeing. Nice job.
Thanks for coming, guys.
Thank you all.
And thanks to our students for doing the questions. You were great.
Thank you all. Great job.
Guys.
Evening.